drivers.
Got battle ready. In the mountains overlooking Sarajevo, there was an early reminder of the fighting that may be inevitable. These guns may soon be fired in anger if Serb forces continue their attacks on UN convoys and troops.
Glad to be out of camp. A bit concerned of what's going to happen, but glad to be out. Instead of sitting around, I'm glad that we're actually out here doing something.
A bit apprehensive, really. We don't know what's going to happen. Apart from that, we're all happy and see how it goes.
Their commander admits the fear of British casualties is always present.
One can never be confident about not receiving casualties, and we have to accept the real possibilities, or the possibility that casualties can occur. We just simply do everything in our power to minimise that risk.
But for much of the day, the Rapid Reaction Force wasn't going anywhere very fast, stuck at Bosnian Army checkpoints for several hours.
We were held here back for so long, we just want to get up there and do the job and get out of the way, and then come back again and let the artillery and the tanks do their job.
One reason for the delay, the French contingent's insistence on using vehicles of camouflage colour instead of the UN's white, which the French say suggests surrender, something these elite legionnaires are in no mood for after 2 French troops were killed by the Serbs. If the Serbs choose to provoke the new force, they could get a bloody nose. The British have more sophisticated weapons and they know how to use them. The 19th Field Regiment boasts some of the best gunners in the world. With British guns pointing at Serb positions and the UN threatening unprecedented airstrikes, the UN is rattling the sabre louder than ever before. But the big question remains, does the West have the willpower to use its firepower? Mark Austin, News at 10, with the British forces on Mount Igman.
Well, that report had to be filed 3 hours ago to be driven down the mountain to the satellite station. But Mark Austin is still with the troops on Mount Igman, and he joins me now on a satellite phone. Mark, what's going on the mountain tonight?
Well, Julia, there's quite a lot going on. I'm sitting in the darkness on the side of Mount Igman, surrounded by a fairly awesome amount of UN military hardware, the main thrust of which the 2 batteries of artillery you saw there, and for which emplacements are still being dug by the Royal Engineers tonight. These are extra emplacements to enable the gunners to move the guns around for tactical purposes. But now they're dug in and ready for action. And the commander of 19th Field Regiment told me tonight that he's not here to go to war with the Serbs, but that if they continue to attack UN targets or convoys, he knows where to find the Serb guns, and he believes he can destroy them. It may well be that convoys into Sarajevo resume shortly, and then the Serbs will be tested. Will they fire on the convoys as they have done in the past, or will they now back off?
And now that they're dug in and in position, what's the mood of the men like?
Well, I would say apprehensive and yet determined. The British are in range of Serb artillery, but it's not thought likely at the moment that the Serbs will start shelling the Rapid Reaction Force. The men here have been training for weeks. They've been waiting for weeks while the politicians decided what they were prepared to do, and now really they just want to get on with it.
Mark Austin, thank you very much. So, under what circumstances will the British troops open fire? Robert Moore reports.
The Serb siege of Sarajevo has lasted for over 3 years. As many as 10,000 of its residents have died from Serb sniper fire and shelling. This morning, another woman stared at the rubble that had once been her house. But none of this will change with the deployment of the British guns. As the French Foreign Legionnaires followed the British and took up positions around Sarajevo, the rules of engagement for the Rapid Reaction Force are clear. The troops will only open fire to protect the UN convoys. They will not seek to defend the civilian population or respond to regular Serb shelling of the city. It is a clear attempt by the British to try and avoid being dragged into the actual war.
Their mission remains one of peace, not of war. They're not equipped to attack anybody. They're not equipped to take territory. They don't have tanks or anything like that. But they can make a response if the United Nations troops who are trying to save lives come under attack.
The British troops are positioned on Mount Igman, 6 miles southwest of Sarajevo. Their main aim is to protect the mountain road overlooked by Serbian guns from Tachin to Krasnica. This vulnerable route is the only way in for the UN convoys. The 12 British guns have a range of 11 miles, so they can hit back at any Serb position if either the UN convoys or the UN bases in Sarajevo are fired on. But if a full-scale battle develops, NATO aircraft could be quickly called on to support the British and French troops. And out in the Adriatic on the USS Roosevelt, the fighter planes are constantly training, poised to hit the Bosnian Serbs if they advance on Garage Day. And despite considerable confusion, the Americans are warning that Serb aggression anywhere in Bosnia could trigger the airstrikes.
The Serbs are on full notice that they cannot continue with these attacks on the safe areas or on civilians in Bosnia, generally speaking.
The final British elements of the 24th Air Mobile Brigade have gathered near Southampton. Within a few days, the 500 trucks will be shipped to Croatia to link up with the Rapid Reaction Force. The Ministry of Defence knows that the British troops are now more exposed than ever before. The great fear is they will become involved in artillery battles. And then the Serbs will see the British not as peacekeepers, but as the enemy. Robert Moore, News at 10, at the Ministry of Defence.
After weeks of waiting, the 3 footballers accused of match fixing heard today that they will be charged. Bruce Grobbelaar will be charged with 4 offences, John Fashanu with 2 and Hans Segers with 1. Also on the charge sheet, Fashanu's wife and Malaysian businessman Hang Swan Lim. They'll appear in court in October. The details from James Bays.
The Southampton goalkeeper arrived early to hear whether he would be prosecuted by detectives investigating allegations of match fixing. He's already been interviewed 3 times. Today he seemed relaxed and he joked with officers as he reported to Southampton's Central Police Station. At the same time, Wimbledon keeper Hans Segers and Gladiators star and Aston Villa striker John Fashanu arrived at separate Hampshire police stations. Just minutes later, and it was announced that the 3 footballers, Fashanu's wife Melissa and a Malaysian businessman, would all be prosecuted.
All of them will be charged with a conspiracy, that is, it is alleged that they corruptly received or gave money to influence the outcome of football matches.
All those charged said tonight they were surprised and shocked.
It's just disappointed, really disappointed with the police. But if that's the only way I have to prove my innocence, then we're going to do that.
Today's charges do not cover an allegation against John Fashanu that he was involved in a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, and he'll be interviewed again on that matter when he appears here on police bail in about a month's time. Fashanu avoided waiting reporters tonight, but his solicitor read a brief statement.
John Fashanu continues to protest his innocence in the strongest possible terms. He looks forward to clearing his name.
A similar statement was also issued on behalf of Bruce Grobbelaar. All 3 footballers appear in court in October. James Bays, News at 10, Southampton.
A suicide bomber on an Israeli bus killed 5 other passengers in Tel Aviv's business district this morning. More than 30 other people were injured. The Islamic militant group Hamas said one of its supporters carried out the attack. If the intention was to halt talks between Israel and the PLO, it only succeeded briefly. The talks will resume after the funerals are held. Howell Jones at ITN reports.
The suicide bomber chose the busiest time of day to strike in the heart of Tel Aviv, reportedly killing 5 passengers as well as himself. School children and the elderly were among the dead and injured, latest victims of a sustained terror campaign by Hamas extremists. Hamas has killed more than 130 Israelis in the last 22 months. Every attack calculated to tear down the Middle East peace process, turn Israeli anger against Palestinians. The angry response came swiftly after today's bombing, Israelis accusing their own prime minister of making peace with murderers. Yitzhak Rabin saw the carnage at first hand, but he says he will not be bombed into abandoning peace talks with the PLO.
We will not give in to this kind of lunatic atrocity by suicidal terror missions.
Rabin has closed Israel's borders with the West Bank and Gaza, a temporary measure, but the timing couldn't be worse. Tomorrow, Israel and the PLO were to have agreed a deal on extending the Palestinians' powers. Now both sides simply want to keep peace alive after another outrage.
I condemn completely these terrorist activities. This is an attempt to sabotage the talks.
Candles were lit for the victims of today's bombing, but many Israelis fear that if the peace process goes on, so will the killing.
Still to come on News at 10, the links between food and the fall in male fertility. Why was this man allowed out of jail to kill?
No! It bounced out! And after 29 years, was this the bounce that won the World Cup for England?